So in mid to late March, I made a video of my top 10 favorite films on the Criterion collection in anticipation for the Criterion channel officially launching. I thought it would be interesting to see what my favorite films on the collection were before and after the launch. Maybe in a year, I'd come back to this list and see if any other films have made it onto the list or if things have been rearranged and things like that. But in that video, I said that I could probably expand the list with 10 more titles and have a top 20 list overall. So this is the second part, but going backwards with the rankings of my favorite, 11 through 20 favorite films on the Criterion collection. So quickly, I'll just kind of explain my mindset because for some reason I just feel like that's important. So, of course, I have to have seen the film in order to put it on the list in the first place. For the most part, I was only thinking about the film itself, not the supplements, as much as I love Criterion supplements and they help me to appreciate and respect and like a film more. I'm trying to only think about the films themselves. There may be some little exceptions to that, but I'll get to that when I'm talking about those titles. Although it would not have made a difference in the list, I was only thinking about the titles that are in the main collection, the titles that have spine numbers, not the movies that are in the Eclipse sets. And specifically with these 10 films, although I wasn't limiting myself in any way or restricting my choices, for example, I really love French films and I also like films from the 60s. I didn't say to myself I could only choose so many from a certain category, or I didn't want to feel like I was checking boxes or in any way like that. So I am just clarifying that. But for these 10 films, it was a little bit more difficult to actually figure this out compared to my top 10 because I had multiple films from certain directors written down that I was narrowing down to 10, and I ended up going with one film from each director. So I don't repeat any directors except for one who was on the previous list, of the top 10. With these films here, I decided to just go with one film from each director and not repeat directors. I just felt like I had to choose a favorite. So I'm gonna have some sort of honorable mentions anyway when I get to those films that I may have thought of other films, but then I just ended up choosing the one. I still feel like it's a good representation of my favorite films that are on the collection. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the way things are. I don't know why I feel the need to explain myself, but I just am. I mean, it's all subjective anyway. It has to do with, my preferences and my taste and my experiences with the film. Yeah, and also just how maybe these films I've seen more recently than other ones that I had written down, so I chose these ones over those ones. Okay, enough of an introduction. Also, I will have the top 10 video linked in the description and in the card, so if you haven't seen that yet, then I would recommend watching that after this one, even though it doesn't really matter, I guess, because top 20 is top 20 favorite films on the Criterion collection. And also, I tend to say sometimes Criterion films, I do realize that it's just a label. It's just the distribution company that happens to release these films. It's just the way that I simplify saying films on the Criterion collection by saying Criterion films. Also, for the most part, the ranking, I tried to rank it as best as I could. If I were to rank them, this I think is where they would be. But the one that I do know that is definitive is number 11, because it was in my top 10, but then I ended up bumping it down because I had to add another film to the top 10. So number 11 would be number 11. I think for the most part, everything is kind of where it should be. Maybe a couple could be switched in certain places, but again, I guess ranking doesn't matter too much because top 20 is top 20. These are favorite films of mine that are on the Criterion collection. Okay, number 20 is Frances Ha, directed by Noah Baumbach from 2013, and it is spine number 681. This is about Frances, and she's a dancer in New York, and she's at this point in her life where I feel like societal pressures start to kick in, and it's like, hey, you should get a real job and start working on a real career if your dream job that may be a bit more artistic isn't working out very well. Because she is a dancer, but she's not a great dancer. She always gets passed up compared to other dancers. But she loves dancing and she persists, and she also has to deal with like other things that are going on at that time in your life when you're like truly being an adult. This is also about her relationship with her best friend Sophie, who I think is engaged in this film, which sort of causes conflict between the two of them because Sophie is moving on to like the next stage in her life, and Frances is still sort of in this lost, not quite sure what she's doing phase. But their friendship like still endures, and I really like that about this film because I also just feel like it's relatable, not only because I feel I can relate to Frances, but also it's just like everyday life. It's just we're following Frances, and here she is with her friend, and here she is with a different friend, and here she is working on a dance, things like that. It's just Frances's life, and that's what like our lives are too, with our friends and with our family and with our job. I also I think there are some points too where it almost seems like too intimate, or just like private, because there are points where I feel like I'm like eavesdropping on Frances and Sophie in a conversation that they're having, specifically one that I was just like really caught off guard by. But I like that about the movie because I don't know, I just feel like I'm observing them and being allowed into looking at like Frances's life. And also if you know other films that are sort of like about characters at this age where like adulthood hasn't like fully hit them yet, like I'd like films like that. I would like recommendations of films like that because that's like me. Like, yes, I'm legally an adult. I have been an adult for a number of years now, but like I don't feel like an adult. So yeah, I relate to Frances and her just like life, stage of life. Number 19 is Ghost World, directed by Terry Zwigoff from 2001, and it is spine number 872. I actually talked about this a lot more like thoroughly in a previous video, which I will link in the description and in the card. This is actually sort of similar to Frances Ha because it has to do with like characters in a transitional period of life in a way. So Enid and Rebecca, they just graduate high school. Actually, Enid has to like retake an art class because she like skipped it or something like that. So she has to retake an art class to get her diploma officially. But they've graduated high school and they want to like fully gain their independence and get an apartment and get a job and move away from their family, or just like not live with their family anymore, and again just have full independence. And that is also sort of causes like a rift between Enid and Rebecca and their friendship, because Enid is kind of like holding back a bit and not fully committing to finding an apartment and getting a job, and she ends up starting a relationship with Seymour, who is an older man that she ends up having a lot in common with because they both kind of are outcasts and don't feel like they don't relate to other people. And Rebecca, meanwhile, is just like actually getting a job and finding an apartment and moving on, and doesn't understand Enid starting this relationship with Seymour. I feel like I could relate to this a little bit more like when I saw it soon after graduating high school, but I still think that in a way it's relatable. So this is another film that's just sort of like slice of life, following these characters at this time in their lives, and but specifically Enid. She's definitely the main character, and it seems like it sort of takes place in its own little world. I think Ghost World is a very fitting title, as well as, I mean, it's based on the graphic novel by Daniel Klaus. The storyline from the graphic novel and the film are a little different, and I actually prefer the film. Yeah, but I mean, like, the film has the same title as the graphic novel. That was my point. So that's Ghost World. Then number 18, I don't actually have. It is Grey Gardens from 1975, directed by David and Albert. Oh my god, I think his name's Albert. The Maysles brothers. I don't have it, so I don't know what the spine number is on it. But this is a documentary about the Beales, Big Edie and Little Edie, and their lives at Grey Gardens, which is the name of this house that they live in. And they are a sort of riches to rags story in a way. They were once a part of the sort of like aristocracy class, and now they don't have as much money. They just barely can afford things. Honestly, I don't quite know how. I mean, it's not like the documentary like goes into their finances a lot, but I don't know how they still like could live there. Okay. But that's not the point of the documentary. It's really just about the way that they are living there and just who these women are, which I really like, because I'm more of like a character person, even though they're like real people. They're not like characters. When it comes to telling stories, I'm more interested in the people. And I love Little Edie. I love Little Edie so much, and I really need to get this film. I said this the first time that I saw it. I was like, I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna watch it all the time. And then that didn't happen. And I still don't have it. But it's on the Criterion channel, and even though it's on the Criterion channel, I still want to have it, because I could play this all the time, and I want to. Like, I don't even have to watch it. I just want to listen to Little Edie and her explaining things and telling stories, and like, I love her personality and the way that she talks, and yeah, I don't know, I just love her so much. And I actually did watch this recently. I mean, this is just extra information, but I've officially seen the supplements now and watched it with the audio commentary, and watched also the follow-up documentary called The Beales of Grey Gardens. Sorry, I had to think about it for a moment. Yeah, but Grey Gardens, it's just so delightful. And then number 17 is Le Samouraï, directed by Jean-Pierre Melville from 1967. Spine number is 306, and this is a French film, another film that I have talked about in a previous video, so especially because I don't really have that much to say about this, and I'm trying to make sure that I can fit in, like, I don't want to over talk about any of the films so that I can get them all into this video, because my camera cuts off at a certain point. Anyway, I'll link that video in the description and in the card, because I'll have more thoughts about it in that video. But Le Samouraï is a film about a hitman who ends up getting a hit put on himself because people are trying to like cover their tracks and tie up loose ends and things like that. So it's about him trying to figure out who officially wants to kill him and surviving. But I had other Melville films on my list that I was like narrowing down. So I also want to mention Le Dulo and Léon Morin-Prêtre, or Priest. Both of those are out of print, unfortunately, but I did want to mention them because they are movies of his and just overall that I really like. I just think this has like stuck in my mind a little bit more, has kind of lingered. It's probably because I've seen it most recently, but still, I think just like the overall style it's subtle, but it's memorable at the same time. So I went with this one. And then number 16 is another French film, La Belle et la Bête, directed by Jean Cocteau from 1946, and it is spine number 6. It's Beauty and the Beast. I said the title in French like really quickly. I don't know why I say it so fast. You probably couldn't even understand it, but it's Beauty and the Beast. And I just love the way Jean Cocteau like does things. I like his style. I feel like I talk about this a lot, but he sort of has a way of of taking techniques that seem like they're from like the silent era and continuing them in his films, but also not only are they just techniques that he continues with, they're sort of like motifs in his films because there's always like a mirror, but like the mirror is a passageway or like magical in some way, and then it's also like water, water is the mirror. That's probably confusing without me explaining. What I'm trying to think of another one, but that's the one that always comes to mind first. And the way that he uses people as like objects, or like, I mean, with this one, it's a little bit more like, of course he would do that because it's like the staff of the castle have been turned into the objects or have around the castle. So like, of course he's going to use people within the set and like the props and stuff, but like whenever there's like if there's like a statue, then it's actually a person like painted instead of like actually getting a real statue or something like that, or making one himself. I'm sure Jean Cocteau, as just an overall artist himself, probably had sculptures that he could have made, but instead he painted a person. There's also other films that I could have chosen directed by Jean Cocteau that I had written down. I love the Orphic trilogy, which is Blood of a Poet, Orpheus, and Testament of Orpheus. That might be the wrong order. Maybe. Might be the wrong order. But anyway, the Orphic trilogy, unfortunately, is out of print. But you can get Orpheus just as a standalone title. I don't have any of those films, so this is actually the only Jean Cocteau film that I own. So that, as well as this being the Cocteau film that I've seen the most times, those are reasons why I ended up choosing this one. I feel like it's been too long since I've seen the other ones to really figure out which one is my favorite. So I'll just mention the Orphic trilogy, and Beauty and the Beast is obviously the one that I chose. And then number 15 is The Young Girls of Rochefort, directed by Jacques Demy from 1967, spine number 717. This is part of the Essential Jacques Demy box set, but you can get it as a standalone title just on its own. I just pulled this out of the box set that I have. And this is about a set of twins who live in Rochefort, and a fair comes to their town, and you're just kind of following their lives. Like, there's not really a plot, and also there's so many characters, and it's just sort of their lives like interweaved. And that's something that Jacques Demy does a lot with his films that I really like. Somehow the characters are like all connected, and sometimes that's clear in the beginning, but sometimes it's like you find things out like in the end, or as the story is going along. This is a musical. It's like a normal musical where you have like dialogue and then also songs. But Jacques Demy also has another film that is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and that is completely sung. So just to differentiate between the two, this one is not completely sung. There's dialogue and the songs. So this is a musical. It's so colorful and it's just so fun. Again, I can't really explain the plot too much because it really is about the connection of the characters and just like following the characters in their lives at this specific time. That's what kind of films I like. So that is The Young Girls of Rochefort. Number 14, here I have the only repeated director, and that is Mulholland Drive. I think this is from 2001. I really should know that. I'm quite sure it's from 2001. I'm going to be embarrassed if that's wrong and just mad at myself. I don't know what the spine number is, obviously, for the Criterion release because I don't have that. But it's directed by David Lynch, who is in my top 10 like favorite films on the Criterion collection. I do feel like it would be obvious that I would choose 2 David Lynch films, though, because I guess spoiler alert if you haven't seen the other video that I made, but it's Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me that's in my top 10 because Twin Peaks is my favorite show and I'm obsessed with Twin Peaks, and like of course I would choose that movie. And I feel like it is kind of separate in my mind compared to the other films in Lynch's filmography. So Mulholland Drive It's so hard to explain. I don't know why I find that. I mean, it's obvious why it's hard to explain because the whole time you're watching it, especially for the first time, you're just kind of like, what's happening? What's happening? And even like the further you get into the film, I think the more you're like, what is happening? um, I I know I've talked about this in like at least one other previous video, because I showed this to a friend of mine who didn't realize that film could do this, which I really love because I like showing things to people that like make an impact on them, or influence them in some way, in a positive way, obviously, hopefully. Yeah, Mulholland Drive though, as simple as I can put it, I'm forgetting characters' names and kind of mixing things up, but a woman gets into a car accident and wakes up, or yeah, she loses her memory and then finds her way to an apartment where the woman who lives there at the time is helps her to figure out what happened to her while also pursuing her career in acting. That was like so mundane though. Like that's barely what this film is about, but that's what I'm gonna say it's about because there's just like a lot more to it, okay? Just watch it. It's great. And then number 13 is L'Eclisse, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni, whose name is really fun to say. It's from 1962. The spy number is 278, and this is an Italian film. The only Italian film that I have on the list. Everything else is either American or French. So, L'Eclisse, this is one that I don't have that much to say about because it's pretty much about a relationship between these two people on the cover. And that's like it. And again, as I've pointed out already in this video, I like stories that are just showing us these characters at a time in their lives, and we get to know the characters and just see what's going on with them. And I just really enjoy the like slice of life quality, but also it's like really meaningful. This is one that I remember, I mean, I can't like say them off the top of my head, but there were certain parts that I like went back and reread the subtitles and I was like, I like that. So now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I should give this a rewatch. Also, it's part of like an informal trilogy directed by Michelangelo Antonioni. This is definitely my favorite of his, so I didn't have the other two listed, but it's like called his Isolation Trilogy or Alienation Trilogy, one of those terms. It's informal anyway, so it doesn't really, they're not like connected in any way, but the other two are La Ventura and La Notte. And this is either the second or the third. I'm really bad with the order of it, but I know that La Ventura is the first one. But again, the order doesn't really matter. But I thought I would mention that it's technically part of this like informal trilogy. And then number 12 is Masculin, Féminin, directed by Jean-Luc Godard from 1960. Oh my God, where's the year on this? 1966. And it's spy number 308. And this is only available on DVD, so that's what I'm holding up. Oh my God, did I mention that? I feel like I meant to mention this in the beginning. I know the settings on my phone have like changed with the camera, and so I feel like it's like more blurry than it usually is, which is upsetting. So sorry. I have to figure out how to fix it, obviously. Anyway, Jean-Luc Godard is one of my favorite directors, and so it was really hard choosing just one of his films because honestly, I just had so many written down. I also really like Band of Outsiders, and Pierre Le Fou was actually my favorite film for like a year. And I also really like Two or Three Things I Know About Her. I Know About Her, right? That's the title of the film that I am not even sure I'm saying correctly. Yeah, but I think I like Masculin, Féminin the best, and I would like to rewatch a number of his films just to figure out like where I would put them, I guess, in my mind and sort of like in an official ranking of his films. I think that this just sort of deals more with like teenage, young adult characters and that's like around the age that I am and that I was when I first watched it. Yeah, I just remember this one being very much following these like young adults and what's happening in their lives because that's what all these movies are about essentially. And then number 11, I don't have on the Criterion. On the Criterion. On the Criterion. I don't have the Criterion release of, but it's The Virgin Suicides. Oh my god, what's the year of this? 2000? Yeah, 2000. Obviously, I don't know what the spy number is, but I think it's a more recent release, which is one of the reasons why I don't have it. It's directed by Sofia Coppola, and this one, it's just one of my favorite films. Although I do have to mention that I am a bit influenced by the book here, because this is one of my favorite books. It's by Jeffrey Eugenides, and so just, I feel like they go really well together because Sofia Coppola, I feel like really, the film, her style, like, she just embodies the feeling and like the mood and the tone of the book like really well. Just the whole atmosphere of it. And so with that, it is a film that I just really like the cinematography of and the direction of it. It's so hard for me to talk about this as like a film on its own, especially because obviously it is an adaptation of the book, but I mean it's told from the perspective of like the neighborhood boys. I should probably just tell you what it's about. Also, I'm gonna run out of time. So here we go. The Virgin Suicides. It starts off and there are 5 Lisbon sisters, and this, again, the story is told from the boys in the neighborhood who are really fascinated by the Lisbon sisters, and the youngest, Cecilia, tries to commit suicide and then tries again and ends up succeeding. And then over the next year, you just follow the rest of the family in dealing with it and trying to process it and seeing how it affects their lives. And then a year later, after Cecilia had committed suicide, the other 4 sisters end up committing suicide. So it's really tragic and heartbreaking, but like, I don't want to say like an interesting character study because I don't want to say like study as if I'm like watching this to study the characters. Okay, I'm officially gonna run out of time, so I have to wrap this up. Oh my god, I feel so bad. Anything I didn't mention that I need to like clarify, I'll put in the description. I want to know what your favorite films on the Criterion Collection are. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so sorry for this rushed ending, but again, thanks for watching. Bye!